I was the kid who told all the creepy ghost stories at sleepovers. And then I would scare myself so that everybody else was asleep and I was wide awake. I would be at camp, all the kids would be passed out asleep afterwards, my contemporaries, and I'm the one who's too scared to walk down that path to the outhouse. My uncles tell wonderful, wonderful stories. I'm from a very large family. My mom's the oldest of 7. I have 36 first cousins just on that side of the family. And my uncles, in the summertime, we would get together for family reunions and things, and they would make a bonfire, kept the mosquitoes away, and they would tell stories. Not to us kids, but they told stories to each other. And we soon realized if you were real quiet and kind of hung out around the edge, you could hear all sorts of interesting adventures that I don't think my grandmother knew that they had pulled off. Now, my uncles always knew who was listening. Because there were times as kids we were sitting there going, is that like true? And my uncles would smile sweetly and say, well, what do you think? That was their answer. To this day, now I'm a grown-up, I've been telling stories on the road for over 20 years. I can walk up to them and ask, what about this story or that story? And to this day, they will still simply smile sweetly and say, well, what do you think? When I went to university, I studied folklore. And for me, that was a fascinating world because you could find the same story from so many different cultures, slightly tweaked, slightly different, and it reinforced the core belief that I have, that as human beings, no matter what you look like on the outside, we all have bones. And whether you've got more layers on those bones than others, whether you've got different hair, whether you've got different clothing, what you happen to like to eat, but we all have bones. And those stories are the bones. And with folklore, and particularly comparative folklore, where you find the same story in different cultures, you realize that our differences are fascinating and unique. They are not to be feared. They are not to be viewed as a threat. It's just a different way. Because when you look at those stories, the issues in those stories are the same no matter where you are. Because each member of the audience comes from a different history, a different background. So I can never predict. There are elements within a story that I know are solid. In Tortoise and Hyena, we've all been picked on. We've all had somebody just, push those little buttons, What do you do? How do you get out of it? How can you handle this? Within stories, sometimes the way a story is handled, the audience says, well, that was really the wrong choice. And that could be the point of the story, that the audience makes the connection of, well, I'm not going to do it that way. It sure didn't work. Other times it's, oh, what an idea. I never thought of trying it this way and empowering some choices and decisions. With Jack, I love Jack. Jack is so strange. But there is a lovable quality to him. He is just out of the box, thinking and thinking. Some of his ideas work so well, and others flop. And not to prejudge what might or might not work, but to be willing to take the chance. You never know if you don't try. So both of those work. And as far as knowing exactly what the point of the story, when I had done Jack with a group of second graders, we had them doing some writing exercises, sort of analyzing what is the story. You know, what was the setting, who were the characters, what was the conflict, you know, some classroom work and destructuring what makes a story. And as far as what was the conflict, the teachers, because I made the teachers fill out this form also, the teachers said, the Queen is giving a test and Jack is going before the Queen to pass the test. More than one second grader said, Jack's always being picked on by his brothers. And another whole set said, well, Jack's that little brother who just always keeps following you and won't leave you alone. And for a second grader who is dealing with siblings, for them, that's what they heard in that story. And for me as a teller, that answer or those kid answers are just as valid as the teacher's perspective. So I know what the strengths are within a story. I can hope that, you know, with hearing, that will also come through in the telling. But I have learned I can't predict. And for me, that's part of just the fun. And I've had kids come up and adults even come up and just tell me something striking from a piece, and I never saw it from that perspective. So it is always a learning experience.